Do you remember when Bell Hooks said this?
I see a part of Beyonce that is in fact anti-feminist, that is a terrorist.
Quite dramatic, I know.
Sorry.
As much as I love Bell Hooks' feminist literature, I mean, Black looks changed me radically. But Beyonce Giselle, First Lady of the music industry, knows, raised me. I don't think you understand. That's my mama.
She don't have to talk to me. She don't have to say nothing to me. That's my mama.
So believe me when I say that for years, I wrestled with why. In a conversation about liberating the Black woman body from structural violence and objectification, Bell Hooks would identify Beyonce, a woman instrumental in popularizing the modern understanding and image of feminism, as anti-feminist, and even go as far as to say that she was terroristic. But it's not until you become a student of a Hooksian feminist framework, or intersectional feminism if you will, that things start to make a little bit more sense. And you know, Beyonce getting real cozy with the Trumps and billionaire oligarchs like Jeff Bezos certainly doesn't help. One thing you have to give Bell Hooks, the coiner of the phrase white supremacist imperialist capitalist patriarchy, is that she's always understood that sexism is inextricably linked to other forms of discrimination, or all other forms of discrimination, including but not limited to Beyonce's, shall we say, greatest weakness? Capitalism. And if this is a safe space for me to be vulnerable, I'll be honest and say that for a while, up until about 20 minutes ago, I've always said, well, what's wrong with a Black woman getting to the bag? I mean, really? These white men are robbing you blind and everybody's hunky-dory, but the second a Black woman says she just might be a Black Bill Gates in the mega, everybody's in an uproar. It's an issue, but you know, it kind of is a bit of an issue. Beyonce and the pop feminists who would follow in her footsteps to varying extents have created a definition, or helped to popularize a definition of feminism that is self-serving and very dangerous to the rest of us.
Who is we?
Let's zoom out to the current context in which we are living. We've seen a repeal of women's reproductive freedom happen at the same time as they have successfully launched a legislative war on all forms of diversity, racial, queer folks, and essentially everybody who's poor, working class. What do you consider yourself, middle class? They're launching a war on you as well.
Who the f is we?
I don't know how many times I have to say this and scream from the mountaintops, because they have branded this as the big beautiful bill, and they just recently reopened the government at the time of filming, and the big beautiful bill is about to be passed in the Senate. They are removing $1 trillion from affordable healthcare and food assistance program from the poorest among us to give the richest among us a tax break. Yes, that includes the white and Black Bill Gates in the making. Sorry. It's not a joke. A Hooksian feminist framework doesn't see these regressions as happenstance. It sees them as intentional and deeply interconnected. And so if feminism teaches us that systems of discrimination and domination are interconnected, and we see an interconnected effort to discriminate and dominate, then perhaps we are in an anti-feminist time, and that requires an intersectional feminist response. But how does that happen if we don't see these regressions happening to specific communities as connected to our independent struggles? If we can't even name our connected oppression, how can we even imagine tackling our oppressors?
I began to use the phrase in my work, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, because I wanted to remind us continually of the interlocking systems of domination that define our reality, and not to just have one thing be like gender is the important issue, race is the important issue.
The reality is, the folks presenting us with a veneer of feminism that offers us identity representation without redistribution of wealth, resources, and access are in many ways anti-feminist and, dare I say,
The terrorist.
Girl, I wouldn't say that. I would say, however, that perhaps I understand to some extent that in that moment, Bell Hooks was not attacking specifically Beyonce's feminism, but she was exposing something much, much more consequential. Feminism's crisis of meaning.
Let's use Beyonce, for example. When that Flawless track came out, and feminist, a person who believes it, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just all so much like, what is this? What is it? I had heard of feminism before, especially as, like, let's say a 16-year-old practicing comp head and who didn't really know much. I'm like, man, I don't really think feminism is something for me per se. But then we have the Golden Lady come out with her bombshell surprise album, and she brings even just the word feminism, she elevates it to a specific level in the mainstream that it was just like, there's no going back after this. But then you dive deeper and deeper into the work, and you recognize some very clear contradictions. And you realize that, hey, maybe the medium through which I was exposed to this ideology actually contradicts or in some ways even suffocates the fulfillment of what this ideology is actually supposed to be.
Right, the ethos of feminism.
Ethos. There you go. Yeah.
There will be no need to create a men's rights movement that is separate from an intersectional feminist movement that's meant to include everyone.
And the idea that Black masculinity is always being attacked by white supremacy through the tool of femininity, because there's so many Black men that believe in that, that is, I think, the prerequisite of the deprogramming or the unlearning that has to happen for a motherfucker to be able to fully embrace feminism. Because right now they all automatically view Black men, feminism, white supremacy. This is a very popular phenomenon in our community. The gay agenda, they want to demasculate us. They want to feminize. When I'm talking to people about feminism, womanism, whatever, that is what they latch on to, is that this is a programming that is trying to demasculinize Black men.
And trans people, it's a part of it, because then it becomes like these feminists and these trans people.
Yes.
And because so much of it also is about, for men, the crisis of men, we don't have power anymore, and all this feminist stuff and all this trans stuff, and men having been taught that they're supposed to be a provider, having been told I'm a man, I'm supposed to provide, but then there's no social safety net. That all the jobs have been shipped overseas. You can't pay off a student loan. You can't make money. There's no way to make money so you can be that provider that you've been told that you're supposed to be, to really be a man. And so instead of blaming neoliberalism, instead of blaming capitalism, the plutocrats, it's feminism's fault. It's trans people's fault. It's Black people's fault. It's immigrants' fault. So the crisis of masculinity for me is a woman who dates straight men. It's like they aren't evolving and they're tired and I'm over it.
Hey, homegirl, homeboy, and homies, welcome back to the HBC Study Hall, Herbie's Black Cultural Study Hall, a mutual learning space dedicated to the study of Black culture and progressive discourse. And I always say that this is a mutual learning space because we are all students in the HBC Study Hall. Please don't see me as the professor. I too am a student, and so as a student, I welcome any questions, corrections, or additional research in the comment section down below. In fact, it is encouraged. I need that. Now, let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room, shall we? Why the is a male creating a video about the miseducation of feminism? Or, as one of my subscribers put it, be serious. It's both offensive, disappointing, and darkly hilarious that you think you have the right to mansplain feminism to women who you think don't really understand feminism. True. There are women who don't. However, the only people who have the right to educate women about feminism are other women. But by all means, embarrass yourself and show your smug male entitlement. Talk down to us poor little women because your opinion about women's issues are so incredibly important, or your opinions, are so incredibly important, and there's no way a woman could possibly say the same things. Where would we be without one of our oppressors to explain to us how to fight our oppression? Okay. So I'd like to address this earnestly. It's a question that I actually received in good faith from Noir prior to me interviewing her for today's conversation. I feel like it's super important for me to start by acknowledging the importance of the spirit of that critique, right? And also saying I understand why a lot of female feminists would be reticent or hesitant around male feminists. So let me make it plain. I do not consider myself an expert or a leading voice on feminism. I consider myself to be a student of feminist thought, more specifically, intersectional feminism. Shout out to the brilliant Black woman professor and the coiner of the term intersectionality, Kimberle Crenshaw. It's through her seminal work, Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, that intersectional feminism even emerges. It's a kind of feminism that I believe to be the most inclusive, but also, more importantly, most deconstructive of what Bell Hooks aptly calls white supremacist imperialist capitalist patriarchy, and what Laverne Cox, in conversation with Bell Hooks at the New School in 2014, complementarily calls white supremacist supremacist, imperialist, capitalist, cis heteronormative patriarchy. But for the sake of time and my tongue, I will not be saying all those words throughout this video. Girl, we'll be here until next week. I'll be referring to white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist, cis heteronormative patriarchy as either just anti-feminism, because I truly believe feminism to be this inclusive idea of attacking all the systems that impact all minority folks and even majority folks. But we'll save that conversation for later. So I'll just be referring to that as either anti-feminism, fascism, or white supremacy for short. But it is important for me to say that the Black women feminist frameworks that I study intend to include as many marginalized identities as possible so that we can all fight various different systems that oppress all folks, including sexism. Now, I imagine that much of my audience knows what intersectional feminism is. I say this all the time. I have the most philomathic community on the internet. But specifically to you, Miss Lady, I don't mind informing you on what it is. I actually have the exact definition written in front of me. Intersectionality is the concept that overlapping social identities such as race, gender, and class, and others, create unique and compounded experiences of both discrimination and privilege. And so I recognize there are many kinds of feminism out there, and I'm using air quotes very specifically because feminism has become kind of a polysemous definition. It's ever evolving. It means many things. And so there's like liberal feminism, abolitionist feminism, trans exclusionary feminism. There are even people who call themselves conservative feminists. What you should know is the prescribed definition of feminism that I will be using for the entirety of today's video essay is the aforementioned definition of intersectional feminism. I'll be using my male privilege to amplify that through this video. You asked me, and it was something to the effect of, how do I come to feminism as a man? Obviously at the time you didn't know that I was non-binary, but the premise or the crux of the question was still the same. And it gagged me. Girl, I was gathered. It was such an important question and such a simple question that I felt like I'd answered 1,000 times over. But in that moment I was like, Bell Hooks said feminism is for everyone. I'm looking at the book. So I think the reason why I come to this work is the reason why I feel like a lot of people engage with liberatory politics or theory. And that's because of my selfish curiosity. I'll be very honest with you. In college in particular, was interested in better understanding the systems that disenfranchise each intersection of who I am. And I wanted to better understand, obviously, racism as a Black person, but specifically as a Black male. The nuance of that meeting, the homophobia that I experience as a Black queer person, but also what undergirds that and the reason why I experienced that more radically or more viscerally as a Black effeminate queer person, right? The femphobia component of that. And that selfish curiosity, I think, is what enabled me to expand my empathy, to understand that there's no way that I could dismantle homophobia, femphobia, or racism without dismantling white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist, heteronormative patriarchy. You know, the whole big shabam. I think I've been committed to calling myself a practicing intersectional feminist because it's about consistently asking questions and about, I think, trying to live up to an ideal that sits so high, it always gives me something to aspire to.
You know, I really appreciate it. Like I said in our conversation, I really do appreciate the grace you extended me for not being familiar with your pronouns. I appreciate that question resonated with you so much because it was also very important to me. Is there freedom or time for me to ask a follow-up question to what you've just said? So subtracting, or I guess you could say distancing your connection to feminism, be it by your personal identity or the identities of people you care about, what about it still is important to you and do you feel is vital?
So I think my empathy that I've grown is connected to why intersectional feminism is important to me. But if I had to remove my personal connection, I would still understand that an equitable world is objectively a good thing. And I appreciate this theory's methodology as to how we attain that equitable world.
Perfect.
Perfect. Listen, I understand my feminism is flawed, and I stand on the shoulder of many women giants that have come before me, whose work I want to dignify by accrediting and amplifying it today. But I also think it's really important for me as a male to reject the notion that feminism is a political project that only benefits women, or that men and males are somehow precluded from teaching this incredible work that we learn from overwhelmingly women and femmes to other folks, men, women, and everybody else in between and beyond. Hell, I consider some of the most progressive movements in modern American history to be feminist movements. The girls don't want to talk about it, but the Black Panther Party, in my view, was an intersectional feminist movement, right? By the time the 1970s came, early 1970s, almost 70% or over 70% of that party was represented by women, was filled with black women. And so those ideas on activism and resistance strategies need to be amplified, and people need to know that those ideas that you herald were black women's ideas. Girl, the March on Washington, a seminal turning point in the civil rights movement, and the largest protest America had seen up until that date, would not have been possible without a black queer man, Bayard Rustin.
Now clock that type of tea.
No, I'm not going to let you forget that this has been an intersectional movement. No! That is a significant demonstration of resistance that I would deem an intersectional feminist action. It's important for me to name these things as feminists because so many men run away from this idea of connecting feminist to their political resistance strategies because of the prefix fem. I reject that. In Ain't I a Woman, Bell Hooks says, it's obvious that many women have appropriated feminism to serve their own ends, especially those white women who have been at the forefront of the movement. But rather than resigning myself to this appropriation, I chose to reappropriate the term feminism to focus on the fact that to be a feminist, in any authentic sense of the term, is to want for all people, male and female, liberation from sexist role patterns, domination, and oppression. And that's not an anomaly in Hooksian's feminist thought, who to me is, queen mother of feminist thought. In Feminist Theory, her book From Margin to Center, she argues constantly that men not only can, but must participate in feminist struggle, not as allies doing women a favor, but as folks who are also dependent on a liberation from patriarchy to experience self-actualization. Saying, quote, until men share with women the responsibility for ending sexist oppression, feminist struggle will not advance. Now, we will critically discuss the gender piece in part 2. I've divided this series up into 2 parts. I'm calling this series The American Gender Crisis. America has a problem. And it's gender. And so this part 1, is going to primarily focus on the miseducation of feminism from within the feminism movement, or from folks just outside or germane to the feminist movement. You'll get it as we go along. The second part is more so going to focus on the invention of the gender wars and the sex economy. So it's going to be a little more salacious. We're going to be talking about trans girls and trans people, and gender wars and 50-50 dating and blah, blah, blah. All the exhaustive stuff. I'm really excited to get into that because Laverne Cox will be featured more in part 2 than in today's part 1. But all good things come to those who wait. I'm excited to get into today's conversation. I did have to say up front that men and males, you do have a place in feminism, and it is your responsibility, if you want to achieve a kind of sexual self-actualization and realization of self outside of domination over others, to announce yourself as feminist, or to just, before you even announce it, to engage with feminist work. It's actually a bit of a debate that I got into with FD Signifier about why he doesn't call himself a feminist despite doing intersectional feminist work for years.
It's like, I don't want to brand and market myself around the label, because the consequence of that is, one, giving power to the co-option of feminism, which has also happened. A lot of people co-opted feminism. Katy Perry and them just went to space. Look at that. Girl. Look at feminism.
Girl! Not girl you, but girl them. Don't get me started on that bullshit.
Right. And also, I think the real core of your disappointment, which I have to just sit in, is I know if I call myself a feminist, certain niggas will not listen.
There's more nuance to his statement, and I'm going to play that at the latter end of this video, but needless to say, I did reject his statement up front. And furthermore, it's a slippery slope into choice feminism. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. This idea that a woman's choice is inherently feminist because we exist in a society that reduces women or that significantly reduces the amount of choices that women have, even if those choices are white supremacist, exploitative, or capitalist in nature. As long as she calls herself a feminist, she's feminist.
And I'm no longer entertaining the question, is Beyonce a feminist? Because I have nothing relevant to say about that topic. She's a feminist because she says one.
And so you see, this is where the self-proclaimed bad feminist Roxane Gay and I disagree. You don't just get to be a feminist just because you say you're one. As a person who's been reading the work of feminists who I love and adore for a long time, and in community with other Black women and Black queer folks, trans, cis, etc., who all claim themselves to be feminists, I still don't feel comfortable calling myself a feminist. I call myself a practicing feminist, as I said earlier, a student of feminist thought. You don't get to just say you're a feminist and so there you're a feminist. Or people don't just get to push feminist ideas onto you because of certain actions they deem to be feminist. Do they even understand what that means, right? Like, I was scrolling on the internet, the doom scroll the other day, and I saw that people were saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene was in her feminist era because she's been talking against the, gender bias that she's experienced in the Republican sector of Congress. Mama, we can't be talking about this same lady.
I believe that white men are the most persecuted identity in America.
Girl, it's safe to say we've lost the blood clot plot. Girl, they say it. I'm not kidding you. They are saying that in these internet streets. I got the tea from today's sponsor, Straight Arrow News. Y'all know I love me some Straight Arrow News. Girl, if you've been around for a while, you know I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. I've been using Straight Arrow News for nearly 2 years now. And that's for good reason. I trust them. I don't invest years of my life into anything unless I really believe in it. Unless it's a toxic relationship. That I do for the plot. We all know I'm a circle back sister. Stay focused. Straight Arrow News is an app and website that provides you the news from all sides of the political aisle with the express goal of giving you unbiased and fact-based journalism. But they also have a feature on their app and website called Media Miss, where they highlight stories that are underreported or ignored by either side of the political spectrum. If you look here, you'll see Marjorie's alleged encounter with gender bias at the workplace that is being disproportionately covered by left-leaning and center outlets, with just 9% of right-wing outlets covering the story. I wonder why, Marjorie. I wonder why. If I'm going to be really honest with you, there aren't even enough left-leaning outlets covering this story for me. The irony of this would have brought me some much-needed humor in these dark times. But that's exactly why you need a dedicated app that can provide you news that's trustworthy and fact-based. According to Pew Research, over 50% of Americans get our news from social media. And who can blame us, right? It's easy, it's convenient. And sometimes the news comes and finds me. I don't go looking for it. But the issue here is that social media isn't going to distinguish what's fact-based from what's opinion, what's right, left, or center, right? Like, sometimes I don't even know what's real from what's AI. Are you even a real news anchor? So it is really important to have a space that you can trust, like Straight Arrow News, where you know you're getting fact-based and trustworthy journalism. Bring back journalism, buddy. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and download Straight Arrow News today by using the link on the screen, san.com/Herbie, or clicking the link in the description box down below. All right, back to our regular schedule programming. Okay, so feminism has a long and exhaustive history that goes back hundreds of years in an American context. I personally like to think of the very first enslaved African women and queer folks whose stories we will never hear, who refused a Western gender performance, a Western white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist, heteronormative performance, patriarchal performance, who refused it. Those stories we'll never know. I imagine them as the first feminist. I don't like to start with the women's suffrage movement because, one, I don't want to give white women that much credit. I'm sorry. We've got to be very fucking real. But also because I believe it erases the labor, the work, the resistance of my ancestors. And this is the HBC study hall. Black. And so that's a large part of my framework, but also because we're speaking about America and American context, you can't erase the resistance of Black women and black enslaved women and Black enslaved queer folks whose stories we'll never know. And Black men too, straight men. Shout out to us. Shout out to us. Girl, you straight now? The lies, the lies, the lies. But for the sake of this video, we're overwhelmingly going to be looking at 2010s feminism and the anti-feminist response that comes in the 2020s and the latter end of the 2010s. Because one, that's the most inclusive area for queer folks. And so I feel like it's the place where I have the most license to speak. It's also my era of feminism as a 27-year-old person. I came of age in, when Beyonce announced that feminism was cool on the 2014 VMA stage. I was a queer person. I am a queer person in the 2020s. And so I feel like I have the most space to speak about it. And so we will kind of do a little bit of historical deep dives into the 60s and the 70s and compare that to the 2010s and the 2020s. But that's to come. Calm down. You got your wine? Good. You got your tea? Good. You got your 1, 2? Good. Sit back. That's the purview of today's discussion. And there are so many ways that I felt like we could have discussed this, right? Like, there's so many ways to have this conversation. But I decided to use a few feminist figures that pop culture has deemed feminist as case studies for the larger, or people who are not necessarily deemed feminist, but germane to feminism or wouldn't exist without feminist advancement, to investigate the larger misinformation patterns of feminist misunderstanding. Vice President Kamala Harris, college dropout Candace Owens, First Lady of the music industry Beyonce Knowles, and cultural titan Taylor Swift. So let's start with the world's biggest artist.
Beyonce.
No. It's actually Taylor Swift. I know. White feminism. Taylor's version. White feminists did not challenge the racist, sexist tendency to use the word woman to refer solely to white women. They supported it. For them, it served two purposes. First, it allowed them to proclaim white men world oppressors while making it appear linguistically that no alliance existed between white women and white men based on shared racial imperialism. Second, it made it possible for white women to act as if alliances did exist between themselves and non-white women in our society, and by doing so, they could deflect attention away from their own classism and racism. You know, I think a lot of conversations about Taylor Swift's white feminism, or what Andy Zeisler calls marketplace feminism, which is essentially just using feminist imagery and language to make a profit, always centers around her scandals with women in the industry, or calling out just a few high-powered white wealthy men. Her awful dating choices, or more specifically, her hyper-capitalism, which we're definitely going to talk about. But I want to start where it all begins, with the music. I don't know if you remember, because the pandemic came and wiped all of our memories, but in 2019, Taylor Swift released an album called Laverne. On that album was a song called The Man that she then released in 2020 as a single with a video. And I have so many thoughts on this song. You want to talk about the epitome of white feminism? Oh, The Man demonstrates it for you nastily. So for context of the social climate at the time, because I am nothing if I am not a contextual queen. This was in the height of Trump 1.0 and very much so in the rise of the manosphere era. The Joe Rogan experience, an unparalleled manospheric, can we use that term? That will be a word that we will be using throughout this video. An unparalleled manospheric misinformation machine was the #1 podcast in the world. It actually still is the #1 podcast in the world. Kevin Samuels was making it even more commonplace across every meta social platform to denigrate women on the basis of their looks and denigrate men on the basis of their finances. And the racist president who was elected with a plurality of white women votes, even after saying that he would grab them by the was actively ignoring a global pandemic that would go on to kill over 1 million Americans. This was the time that Taylor Swift chose to take a stand against male domination. A really good time, actually. Except when I listen to the song, I can't tell if she's condemning men's negative behavior or lamenting about the fact that she can't do the same things without being ridiculed because she's a woman.
There is no such thing as a bitch. There is no such thing as someone who's bossy. There's just a boss. We don't want to be condemned for being multifaceted.
My God, can't a woman be an exploitative billionaire in peace? No. No! The music video features Taylor Swift in white male drag acting out inappropriate behaviors while she's being, or he's being celebrated for it. I gotta read the lyrics to you because it really drives the point home. She goes, "What's it like to brag about raking in dollars and getting bitches and models? And it's all good if you're bad. If I was flashing my dollars, I'd be a bitch, not a baller. They paint me out to be bad, so it's okay to be mad." I'm sorry. She goes on to say, if she were a man, they'd say I hustled, put in the work. They wouldn't shake their heads and question how much I deserved, what I was wearing, or if I was rude. Of course, the refrain enlightens us or gives us an idea into Taylor Swift's mind, like her attitude around these men's hyper-capitalist aims and aggressive acts of domination. I'm so sick of running as fast as I could, wondering if I'd get there faster. If I was a man, I'd be the man. Sorry. Of course, this isn't a disavowing of the impossible rat race of hyper-capitalism and anti-feminist capitalist patriarchy. It's really just an expression of her desire to do it too without critique. What is the age-old expression? They don't want equality. They just want the power to oppress. Ciao. Stay focused. But you know what? She's right. If she were a white wealthy man, these acts of aggression would be deemed as powerful, and capitalist conquest would be seen as assertive leadership and not a vindictive kind of manipulation that is disproportionately pushed on women, and particularly women of color. But whiteness and wealth are doing a lot to categorize the kind of man that she's criticizing, or not. The man she wants to be. I don't know. This song for me perfectly exemplifies Taylor Swift's and so many white women's relationship to feminism. Her desire is clearly that women, especially white women, be treated equally within the existing hierarchical structure. And often in the 2010s in particular, when America was espousing itself or attempting to be a post-racial, queer inclusive liberal utopia, it often felt like erasure wasn't really the express goal of white feminists. But I was also a teenager, so I could be misremembering. After all, the gays had the right to love out loud. We had a black president, honey. And you had folks like Jay-Z saying that sexism was a bigger problem than racism.
At this very moment, America is way more sexist than they are racist.
Well, what do you expect from a man who referred to being called a capitalist as a slur? I should also point out that during this time, there were very serious and necessary movements like the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement rising in prominence. And I cannot overstate the importance of the Me Too movement for female victims, and honestly, any victim, to feel like they had a voice at a time where for so long, women and men as well felt like they didn't have a space to come out and say, hey, this happened to me, right? We know that sexual assault is the least reported crime. And so it was necessary. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that Me Too was founded by a black woman, Tarana Burke. And much of the media's coverage of the movement surrounded affluent white women and celebrities' needs and their experience with SA and SV. I'll never forget Time Magazine's 2017 Person of the Year cover photo, where they completely neglected to include the founder of the Me Too movement, Tarana Burke. And what we did see was overwhelmingly white women and, yes, Taylor Swift. And that's not to erase the experience of SV and SA that these women have experienced. Like, everybody deserves a voice. But there's a reason why it was disproportionately white women on that cover. And also, I'm gonna just say it, like, Me Too was rising in prominence the same time as Black Lives Matter was. How did white feminists support black folks during that time? Black women, cis and trans, who are disproportionately more likely to experience DV, SV, all the forms of violence. What were they doing? I'll tell you what they were doing. They were putting black squares on their screen to stand in solidarity with black folks. We're gonna show them our power. Girl, don't tee me off. In the mind of the 2010s white feminist, things weren't perfect, but they were getting better. And so you couple that with the rise of marketplace feminist media from huge brands like Dove, Nike, Verizon, Target. Hold on. And any chance I get to remind y'all, we are still boycotting Target, I'm going to do it. We are still boycotting Target. But anyway, those brands were interested in pushing a kind of corporate feminist ideal that was profitable, not a radical, disruptive, intersectional feminist framework that was a political project that would reorient society, but something that got more bang for the buck. And so they were deeply interested in projecting feminism as an idea that needed to be fixed, right? The women's issue as an idea that needed to be fixed. And it still does, right? But heralding it above others, holding it above others such that you might believe that, oh, well, if I buy a Future is Feminist t-shirt, I'm engaging in a feminist act, a revolutionary act. If I support a woman-owned business, or if I buy this female album, what I'm doing is feminist in and of itself. So that is the start and end of my activism. And I'll be honest with you, I still do the latter too. I do still shop at women-owned businesses, and most of the vinyls that I own are by women, black women in particular. That just happens to be the music that I enjoy, and I like to put my money in communities that I care about. But I don't recognize that as a radical act. I recognize that as something I do, a small act that I can do to give back. And I like the music. But white and corporate feminism tells us that that's the end of the road. And this song, much like much of Taylor Swift's public feminist antics, features a mostly white cast, centering the experiences of middle and upper class white women as juxtaposed to wealthy white men. As if all men have equal power and potential to dominate, and all women are even allowed in these affluent spaces of power where they could even be ridiculed for how they navigate those spaces. Like, the average woman is not navigating these spaces, mama. In Ain't I a Woman, Bell Hooks argues this: the woman who was seen as inferior because of her sex can also be seen as superior because of her race, even in relationship to men of another race. Because feminists tend to evoke an image of woman as a collective group, their comparisons between women and blacks were accepted without question. This constant comparison of the plight of, quote, women and, quote, blacks deflected attention away from the fact that black women were extremely victimized by both racism and sexism, a fact which, had it been emphasized, might have diverted public attention away from the complaints of middle class and upper class white feminists. Or, as T. Noir put it,
white feminism is useless. I think that we arrive at that conclusion, but then deliver it with different words, like every couple of years, at this rate, every couple of months. But like feminism that centers the woes, the desires, and the aspirations of white women will always harm somebody.
Now look, I gotta acknowledge again that despite being a non-binary person with some sweetness to him, it still give it big old black man, black king, dare I say. And so, of course, I don't understand what it's like to be a white woman. I know. Many of you are gagged, honey.
Are you telling me that you are not? I'm not a woman. White? Oh, the deception.
This racial ambiguity was taking it.
Negro, please.
But I do know, both from a historical and anecdotal perspective, what it's like to be a black male in proximity to white womanhood. Especially because our bodies have been used as antithetical euphemism, not only as just physical polar opposites, but moral ones as well. In the American imagination, no human person is a greater threat to the white female body than the black male. Which really brings us to the foundation of Taylor Swift's politic. That infamous exchange on the 2009 VMA stage between she and that black male aggressor who activated an indoctrinated response that would go on to color every business move that she would make, her hyper-capitalist ascension, and her feminism. Weaponized victimhood. I guess all pop feminist roads lead back to the VMA stage, huh?
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
Now I'm gonna tell you what he didn't do. I'm gonna tell you up front. I'm gonna tell you what I know. What he didn't do was lie. You know, I live for You Belong With Me. You belong with me. I live for that song. But winning Best Female Music Video the same year that Beyonce dropped the unparalleled, unmatched, phenomenal music video from the with the phenomenal body and otherworldly dance moves to match? Oh, that's crime. Oh, that's criminal. Guillotine. Immediately. Death by lethal injection. Not to Taylor Swift, but to the proverbial people that I'm discussing. No real people. So did he lie? No. But what he did do is serve as a catalyst for Taylor Swift's villain origin story. Really a moment that so many Swifties go back to as an example of male domination irrespective of race. And what I will give those girls is they got a point, right? Like, he was dead ass wrong. And that was an act of male domination. Like, perhaps he wouldn't have interrupted a male to say some ridiculous stuff like that.
First of all, George Bush doesn't care about black people. Please call.
Well, perhaps not. Of course, those two situations are completely different, but let's keep it real. You are a black man from Chicago. You know better than to run up on that white girl like that and snatch that mic up out her hand. What's wrong with you? I guess you not black, you OJ. Okay. But in my view, since then, Taylor Swift has been seen as a perpetual underdog, a powerful victim. We were primed to see her in that way, but honey, the stars couldn't have aligned more perfectly. She's been positioned as someone powerful enough to speak out against certain white male examples of patriarchy, but too soft, too delicate to speak out against acts of bigotry and racism and other forms of discrimination from other minorities. Let's talk about her dating that well-documented racist, bigot, and misogynist. Ooh. Girl, I got his history right in front of me because I'm not really a Swiftie like that. What I do know is that he posted Islamophobic jokes like this one that is on the screen. He allegedly did a Nazi salute, which I will not put on the screen. You can go ahead and do the research for yourself and be the judge. He's made sexist statements about many women, including but not limited to Taylor Swift. He's just not a good guy. But Taylor Swift is a good girl, right? And so when she sees him coming out and making these bigoted statements about another woman in the industry, of course, as a girl's girl, she's gonna come out and say something wrong. Just a few months before it became public knowledge that he and Taylor were dating, he was on the Adam Friedland podcast and made the following bigoted statements.
Nick doesn't know it.
She's like
one of the Spice Girls.
Yes, that's
she's
right.
like this rapper.
She's the rapper
that has
Spice. Inuit Spice Girl. Just this chubby Chinese lady. Yeah, I rap music. Do they talk like that? Do Inuits talk like that?
They don't talk with a Chinese accent.
They talk like a more Hawaiian style.
Yeah, more Hawaiian.
Yeah.
Welcome to Hawaii.
Yeah. Locals only. Locals only. Coconuts.
Yeah, that's what Ice Spice is like.
She's a very attractive woman that released one song and basically
You slide in your DMs, you're like, so what are you, a fucking Eskimo or something?
Wow, what did Taylor Swift do? That's a great question. Well, instead of condemning him, instead of vehemently condemning those actions, she featured Ice Spice on a song, Karma, the remix. Yeah, I mean, girl, it was trash. Girl, who asked for that? Who asked for that? I don't know what Ice Spice's fans are called. Oregano? Girl, curcumin? The Turmerics didn't ask for that. And certainly the Swifties didn't. If I'm going to be honest with you, if the man is any indicator of her politics, she wasn't offended by this. Like, Sister Girl has publicly declared her desire to be in proximity to the kind of domination that men are able to propagate and demonstrate without any criticism. But I know a lot of you girls are going to say I'm dragging it, I'm reaching, so I'm going to move on and leave that alone. For now. What I will say is, girl, we know this to be her MO, only speaking out when things benefit her. You all remember what year was it? 2015? The 2015 VMAs where Nicki Minaj released one of the biggest music videos in 2014 with Anaconda. Girl, it's no question. And she was not nominated for Music Video of the Year. That music video has garnered over 1 billion views. She called out the VMAs for not nominating music videos that celebrate women of curvier bodies. The tweet read this: "If your music video celebrates women with small bodies, you'll be nominated for Video of the Year. Oh mama, Taylor Swift came running. Girl, sticks and stones may break her hips, but that'll never stop her from chasing you." Taylor Swift centered herself and took it personal, despite the fact that Bruno Mars, Beyonce, Ed Sheeran all had videos that had slimmer women in them, and thus centering those slimmer women. She responded to Nicki Minaj's tweet unprovoked, saying, "I've done nothing but love and support you. It's unlike you to pit women against each other. Maybe one of the men took your spot." Nicki Minaj responded by essentially saying, girl, I love you too. I wasn't really talking about you, but you should speak up about this. And instead of acknowledging her privilege and acknowledging that, you know what, you're right. The VMAs has historically privileged women who look like me, white, thin, and has historically kept women out like you, black, curvy, black women. So let me speak up against this. She was just oh, my bad. I read it wrong. I'm so sorry. And what did she do? She went on to win the award because that's where her interests lie, right? Capitalist and careerist gains. It doesn't take much to find out the VMAs has a really racist history. They didn't show black people for years until Michael Jackson became literally the biggest thing since fucking Beethoven. And so they had to put him on because Thriller is still the highest selling album of all time. So they had to put motherfucker on. I'm not saying that Taylor Swift is a racist. I'm just saying she's probably comfortable with racism. And I know there are going to be people who will bring up her history of endorsing Democrats in the 2018, 2020, and 2024 elections. And she has had significant impacts on those elections. If I'm going to be honest with you, if endorsing Joe Biden, a centrist, and Kamala Harris, another centrist, is your idea of a radical act, we just have completely different worldviews. Also, I do want to be clear that too was a PR move. She didn't do that just because she's this, I feel compelled to do it. I know she cried on camera and told you that's what she felt, but Taylor Swift is surrounded by the most smart business people in the world. It took me no time, 5 minutes, to figure out that women have been becoming increasingly more liberal and voting in increasingly more liberal directions over the course of decades, but there was a significant spike in women moving in a more liberal direction in electoral politics in 2016 after Trump's election. Coming out as anti-Trump after having access to all that data is not her being fearless. It's an assessment of the data to understand that most of my fans are white, liberal presenting, or women who espouse themselves to be liberal. And so this is my demographic. This is where my demographic is leaning. And I've already said to my people that I'm a feminist, I'm an activist. This is where I want to lie, historically speaking. So this was just her catering to her audience. Girl, y'all make it seem like the lady is Ida B. Wells. And that image of her crying to her family hysterically is burned into so many people's brains and gags me every single time, because you would have thought that she was back at a Marxist, honey, with a burning bra in one hand and a Black Lives Matter flag in the other. The man was also a centrist. Some would also say right-leaning. And he lost! All that hooting and hollering and crying and shit, and he lost. But from a PR perspective, she always can go back and say, I cried, I fought, I defended, I did all I could. Did you? Did you, mama? And while everybody's focused on her white woman tears, I'm focused on what the daddy is saying. The daddy who has been a long-standing, not necessarily manager, but someone who has been instrumental in the business affairs of Taylor Swift since the inception of her career, is worried about her safety like any parent would be. But he's also talking about economics. How is this going to affect you financially? These are the conversations that he was having with her. Follow the money. I just don't buy much of her feminism, and I think she's exemplary of so many white feminists' idea of what it means to be a feminist. And yeah, don't even get me started on the new album, because girl, we will be here until next week talking about Taylor Swift. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying I have to drive home the importance of why Taylor Swift's feminist messaging matters. There is not a musician to date that is bigger than Taylor Swift. It's not even close, honestly. She's had the most successful tour of all time, grossing over $2 billion. She's been the biggest streaming artist for years. And for 3 consecutive years, according to the IFPI, which is an international organization that collects all the data on the sales of recording artists across the globe, she's been ranked the #1 artist 3 years consecutively and 5 years in total. She's huge, is the point. And her messaging matters because she's speaking to so many white women, particularly middle and upper class white women who have the most social and economic capital. And so their ideas of feminism matter because they directly communicate and disseminate those ideas to white upper class and middle class men who have even more social and economic capital. And so if they're understanding this movement as #ForTheGirls or a resistance movement against like the boys, and it's only for like the richest and whitest among us, then they're getting the wrong idea. Everybody's getting the wrong idea, especially in a time where men, especially white men, are enacting a very dangerous anti-feminist social and political agenda based upon overwhelmingly their bigotry, but also an erroneous definition of feminism that is spread largely by white feminists like Taylor Swift. It's a big issue. Her refusal to engage critically with race, class, and other forms or other modes of discrimination while full-throatedly calling herself a feminist further perpetuates the idea that feminism is all girl boss bark with no radical ideological bite. Whether you like it or not, Taylor Swift has positioned herself as a face of feminist thought in the modern era, and because she's larger than life as a celebrity and a fucking billionaire, she has the capital to make people think that she is what she says she is. And this is my last point. For us, that was the last one was going to be my last point, but this is my final point. I have to talk about the billionaire status piece of it because she's the only billionaire to ever become a billionaire solely off of her music, which would be inspiring or inspirational to me if I didn't hate the idea of billionaires or reject it. I don't hate it, but I reject it at this present moment. Maybe I'll hate it someday. But I reject that they should even exist. I think we say so often that there's no such thing as an ethical billionaire or billionaires suck, and we don't really explain enough why that is. And so that could be a whole nother video in and of itself, but I will say this, just to give you an idea so you can image it. If you were to save $1,000 every single day, Sunday to Sunday, from the time that Jesus was born, and so most historians say that that was about 4 to 6 AD, until today, you still would not have $1 billion. $1 billion is an incomprehensible amount of money. I know a lot of times we go, oh, they're millionaires, they're billionaires, they're rich. We just put them in a rich category. And that does a lot of work to undermine the significance, the danger, the violence of what it means to be a billionaire. $1 billion is a lot of money. And why does a lot of money matter? Of course, we always say to be a billionaire, you are exploiting the poor. You can't earn that much money. They are concentrating capital that would otherwise be circulated through the regular economy, right? Through wages, small businesses, the real economy, where working class people earn, spend, and reinvest. And I know Reaganomics taught you that the rich people's money trickles down to you, but that is a lie. Most of their money is parked in the stock market, offshore accounts, art, ways that are not reflowing or circulating through the economy. So you never see it, right? They're not circulating through small businesses, nothing. You never see it. And also they don't pay taxes. And so when they don't pay taxes, somebody got to pay it. We got to pay it. When you're a billionaire or 100 billionaires, centibillionaire, these are hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars that are missing from the federal government. And so we have to pay that. Money that could be going to roads, infrastructure, social services, gone. We pay that through government cuts to healthcare, education, schooling, housing, local sales, property taxes, payroll taxes are all increased so the government can compensate for this missing money. Billionaires literally make you more likely to experience housing, job, and economic insecurity. they're bad. They're indefensible. They don't like you, actually. Which brings us to that Black Bill Gates in the making. No, Beyonce, no! Beyonce, a paradoxical feminist. So where do we even begin with Beyonce? Let's start in 2023. So 2023 was the eras of Taylor Swift, Barbie, and Beyonce's Renaissance. So good. The Barbie movie generated over $1 billion. The Eras Tour contributed, I think, over $4 billion to the GDP, and Beyonce added $4.5 trillion to the economy. Women were on top. And so we saw a resurgence of the kind of 2010s discourse around, well, really 2010s feminism, what we just spent the last how long condemning this kind of corporate marketplace feminism that said, like, we could buy our way into certain women getting into certain places, and that representative justice would be redistributed to not just women, but like, minorities across the board. But the comparison of Beyonce and Taylor Swift is always going to be fundamentally annoying to me. It teased me off, and I know I wasn't alone. I'm wondering, do you think there's merit to juxtaposing someone like a Taylor Swift to Beyonce in feminist discourse?
Only to point out the flaws and inconsistencies. But other than that, no. Like, why would we do that? Aside from them, like, being mega stars. No.
Hello. We don't got the answer, Sway. No, I agree. We have to point out the flaws and inconsistencies. And every critique that I announced about Taylor Swift's corporate or capitalist feminism all applies to Beyonce. I'm just not going to say it again because I've said it already. Billionaires suck, no matter how compelling their art is, to me or to you. But Beyonce's feminism is vastly different from Taylor Swift's feminism, mama. There's a real engagement with intersectionality in Beyonce's art. From the celebration of Black queer art, life, and legacy via Renaissance, or the Black woman ancestral veneration of Lemonade, even all the way down to the African ancestral roots that Beyonce brought us back to the continent to feel in The Gift, Black is King. It's there where she repudiates these ideas of Africa as ugly or inferior or savage. And while I understand there's an elitism to it, I lived for seeing it. You constantly see the young children who in sub-Saharan Africa who do need our help and attention. Hashtag free soutien of the kids with the fat bellies, and you don't see the richness, wealth, and culture of Africa enough. And so we need to be cognizant of what's happening there and how African resources are being stripped by colonists in this very second. But we also need to acknowledge the beauty of Africa as well. And so I really appreciated Black is King for that. There's just a sophistication to the pedagogy of Beyonce, where she's teaching us about not just American Blackness, but connecting it to diasporic conversations, connecting it to Black queer conversations, Black conversations on Black womanhood. Like, every intersection of Black identity and American identity and global identity is found in Beyonce's work. And don't even get me started on the pedagogical spectacle that was Homecoming. Oh, mama. Mother is an educator and a teacher and a professor. Beyonce. Okay, girl. After being the first Black woman to headline the largest festival in America, the Coachella stage, and bringing all that Black academic HBCU culture to the stage, she then extended that experience by putting it in a documentary accessible to the world, putting work in our homes that features the scholarship of so many Black progressive thinkers like Maya Angelou, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Nina Simone, Cornel West, W.E.B. Du Bois. I know many people say Du Bois, but I live for Du Bois. These are people who radically shifted the way we understand race, class solidarity, and the interconnectedness of so many forms of discrimination. And I'm just not certain that the world would have embraced them, would have been compelled to know these people and their work without someone like Beyonce. There's a pride that comes through in this lady's work that is so idyllic to experience and so inspiring, but is also deeply saddening because of its contradictory nature. We know her creative desires through her art, but we also know her capitalist desires through her art. I pull up like a Freedom Rider, hop out on Rodeo. Go to Freedom Riders were anti-capitalist boots. Deeply saw capitalism as an impediment to the freedom of Black people. They would be deeply offended by that lyric. And it's not just the artist, the artistry of her trying to combine these antithetical ideas, but it's that she really desires to be a Black Bill Gates in the making. Listen, I recognize my limitations on being able to read the Queen. I am working on a video that's going to explore the performance of Beyonce's progressive politics when Act 3 comes out, so stay tuned for that. But until then, I got into a lengthy conversation about this with T Noir.
Let's use Beyonce, for example. When that Flawless track came out, and feminist, a person who believes in like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just all so much like, what is this? What is it? I had heard of feminism before, of course, but there was still kind of like, but didn't I hear somewhere that like, they never shave and they have hairy bushes and they're all lesbians, which go. Yeah. Like, yeah, exactly that. But obviously, especially as like, let's say a 16-year-old practicing comp head and who didn't really know much, I'm like, man, I don't really think feminism is something for me per se. But then we have the Golden Lady come out with her bombshell surprise album, and she brings even just the word feminism, she elevates it to a specific level in the mainstream that it was just like, there's no going back after this. So I'll absolutely give her that. And it was cool to learn about feminism and sexy to cite feminism. And it was fun and it was novel and all of those things. But then part of the work, it's like, you dive deeper and deeper into the work and you recognize some very clear contradictions. And you realize that, hey, maybe the medium through which I was exposed to this ideology actually contradicts or in some ways even suffocates the fulfillment of what this ideology is actually supposed to be.
Right, the ethos of feminism.
There you go, yeah. And so once you have to come toe to toe with the fact that, okay, a lot of things are in opposition, even though there seems to be some sort of connect, like it seems right, but some things just are not making sense. Some things are not adding up. And you recognize those contradictions, you have to then like work on that. I feel like once you actually dive into these ideologies, you then undertake like a moral responsibility to address those contradictions and make fundamental change within yourself so that those contradictions are not like showing up in everything that you do, or at least they bother you if they do. But what I'm trying to say is like the contradictions became present and people either A, did not act on those contradictions, or B, just fully pretended like they didn't exist. And I feel like that's the stance that we've been at for so long, because we owe a lot to pop culture of the 2010s for introducing us. But we've reached a level where it's like, okay, but now we also have to hold it accountable for where it suppressed those same ideologies or where it's in opposition of those. And I feel like instead of journeying to truth, people kind of just want to ascend to comfort. And that is not how this goes. Like, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be, like we spoke of before, painful sometimes. But I mean, such is the continuum of human understanding and seeking the truth.
Put that last sentence on a t-shirt. Thank you. Thank you. Correct. Okay, correct. CORRECK. Okay. Yes, I'll never forget it being 2014, the MTV Awards, and Beyonce had Feminist plastered behind her.
I will never forget how that looks.
Incredible silhouette.
I did a project on it in college. I think that was a public speaking class actually. And I remember putting the slide up, and I remember my line was, so as you can see here, we have the queen, and the whole class busted out laughing, and I was like, but it's like, it brings up, the imagery evokes very vivid memories, doesn't it?
Yeah. And certainly provocative in that there is so much, there's a wealth of information, not necessarily in the self-titled era, But certainly in the subsequent eras that would follow of Beyonce adding so much historicity and so much progressive imagery, symbolism, and just like art, infusing that in using the work of people who would certainly call her work regressive.
Or terrorism.
Hey, look. No.
She's was the one who said it. I'm just echoing it. She wasn't wrong.
Okay, so then this wasn't where I was trying to go, but I am curious. Do you think that performing progressive politics is always regressive? Or is there a space for it to be transgressive?
No, it's always regressive. It's always regressive.
Always.
Because it just always is. I don't see how it could push us forward at all because it's a performance. So like at one point, then at a certain point, like it works up until a certain point, right? And then you have to go back and be like, but not here, right here. And I actually meant to say this and I should have said this, but like the reason it's tricky here is, and we could skip all of that if you just didn't perform.
I would push back and say that I think the very nature of being a feminist is to be in conversation and in conflict. And so I think even Bell Hooks says, and I forget what book this was it Black Hooks? Feminism for Everyone? It was some Bell Hooks book. That we need feminist ideas in radio and hip hop and literature, etc. Right? That feminism has to exist outside of academia, right? And in that, I think there is a call, not necessarily for the commercialization, but the ubiquity of feminism. And I think that Beyonce is a very problematic person for a myriad of reasons, specifically within the context of feminism, because there are so many different contradictions. And I feel like there's this desire to present something that you don't really live. But I also feel like a flawed messenger can introduce you to really good messages. And even by your own, I think for myself and you, Beyonce is a testament to why I became interested in feminism and why I'm able to come back and be in conflict with her and critique things that I just genuinely think that. But this is what I push back, right? When people are like, "Oh, well, she did it for profit. She does it for gain," right? And I know you are going to have a different, or I imagine you'll have a different opinion on me on this. But I always say to that, being politically neutral is incredibly financially expedient. Look at Rihanna. Beyonce could absolutely choose, or could have absolutely have chosen to not take the route where she becomes, I won't say a pariah because that's a bit traumatic, because she constantly totes this line of being what I would call like a translucent political figure or a conduit to introduce people to progressive thought while existing in a different lifestyle. I think it's the most financially feasible to be politically neutral. I think that to make a decision to use Nina Simone's lyrics, that it's an artist's duty to represent the times that they live in, to make a decision to create political art. It gives me very Tupac. I may not be the person to change the world. I know my shit is fucked up. And I have no desire to change that for me. But I may spark the thought in the mind of someone who changes the world. So I think that that's a selfish person who says that I don't want to do the work. But I think it's a person, I think there's utility having the scale that Beyonce does to introduce people to feminist ideology. And also to maintain that scale, she has to remain, I feel, particularly ambiguous. Because Nina Simone, for the genius that I believe she was, she never, for many reasons, mostly phenotypic and the style of music that she performed, but also because of her political ideas that were so obviously infused into her work, would never have been able to maintain the scale that Beyonce does. And the usefulness that I view in that scale is to continually be able to introduce the masses to progressive ideas, even if that person doesn't necessarily live up to them.
Okay. So like in the case of Nina Simone, I feel as though if she were still alive today, she would have never ascended to the level of Beyonce because she was so cemented in her radicalism. With Beyonce, because she's been around for so long, we have so much to put under a microscope. And I feel as though just her being a big name and a loud voice and incorporating what seems to be radicalist imagery at one point was nice then. But then when we put that in comparison to what her career eventually turned out to be or where we are right now, that's when you see it's not just a matter of like she stayed ambiguous or she stayed a little bit mysterious or like here's a little bit, do something with the rest, but a genuine betrayal of what she started as. So it's like at that point, you then have to question not just the integrity, but like the intentions. And it's greater than profit at this point. It's like, well, what do you believe? Genuinely, what do you believe in, and who are you? Because I don't know. I thought I knew, or I thought I had at least a glimmer of an idea. And maybe the attachment I had to that idea was the reason why I even became, no, not even maybe, certainly, that's the reason why I even became interested in the feminism and then the Black radicalism and so on and so forth. But now that there has been no continuation or consistency with that, and I see that it was genuinely just a phase, and this is not like just fashion that we're talking about. These are bringing or discussing systems that affect people's lives. Like, this is literally life or death. And to know that there is not so much respect, honor, or integrity in your approach to that it can't be thicker than just a phase or thicker than just an album or an era. Yeah, I feel like more harm was done than good. I would have rather have stumbled across feminism by like being in community with the people whose feet are actually on the ground, however long that would have taken, because I just love to believe that I was fated to think the way that I think. So I would have rather that introduction to it, however long that would have taken, even if that meant I would have still been working a desk job this whole time, than to have it expedited through someone who does not actually care about it the way that they should, or the way that they have positioned themselves to, or pretended to, I should say.
I respect everything you said. The word betrayal is sitting with me. It's a standout. It's certainly a standout. I'm definitely going to close my laptop, ball up in a corner and cry. No, I'm just kidding.
But I get that too. Yeah, to finish off like the last thought, because when you said like ball up and cry in the corner, like I know you're being hyperbolic, but like it is sad. Like this was my Shayla. Like, what do you mean when I say, hold up, they don't love you like I love you? Y'all did not love the lady like I love the lady. And I'm gonna stand by that. So it's like, to have to reckon with that is terrible. And trust me, if there could be another way, I would have chose it. But I had to choose truth instead. So here we are.
Put that on a t-shirt as well. Fuck. Because what I'm trying to get at is my perception of the utility of that loudness, of making noise, and the introduction to and because like you said, I would touch and agree, as the Christians say, with you that you were fated for this work. It just seems like something that is in your bones, right? It's not on you, it's in you. But everybody is not so fortunate to be surrounded by folks who I would venture to say, just by virtue of you being a Black woman, likely in community with other women, and a queer Black woman in community with any one of those intersections, that you would find your way to this work. The people with the most economic power and political power, I'm not certain that they will, because I think that making the work sexy prepares you in a way for what is the difficult terrain of committing to the highs and lows of an ideology that is not supported in mainstream media or in mainstream culture in a real, substantial way. So I guess I'm curious, do you see the usefulness in being able to introduce people who otherwise would not have been introduced to this ideology? And do you think there's another way to attain that level of scale with these progressive politics?
Yeah, so we're here now, right? So it was obviously useful no matter the outcome of it. Like, the usefulness was extracted and we're here now. But I do believe that there was another way. I would have to spend some time brainstorming on exactly how it would be. But I think that all just starts on like valuing the truth and seeking it by any and all means, and having enough, I keep saying integrity, but it's so much deeper than integrity. Like, integrity and power, be that walkaway power or like actual like wealth or access to tell the truth plainly. And if you want to like sexy it up, sure, sexy it up. You want to make it catchy in a song, make it catchy in a song, but like also hold true to that and understand that like these are disrupting, in a good way, disrupting the trajectory of how people consume so much.
All right, so we've discussed a lot about the feminist ideals and the flaws in that movement. Let's talk a little bit more about the anti-feminist responses. Candace Owens, Conservative Faces and Feminist Places. I'm sure many of you know the headache that is college dropout Candace Owens. She's an anti-woke, anti-feminist, anti-black conservative. She's infamously been against the Black Lives Matter movement. She has defended Hitler's nationalism and said that feminism is a threat to the family. Honestly, I don't even believe that she believes much of what she's saying. When you find out that she started her career creating an anti-conservative blog that was unsuccessful, and so she, quote, this is a direct quote, became conservative overnight. You realize this lady is nothing more than a grifter. Like many of the other Black conservatives, I did an extensive video on the alleged rise of Black MAGA. So if you want to know my thoughts on that, you can check that out. But I do want to engage these ideas as if she actually does believe them, because even if she doesn't wholly believe these ideas, the folks who are endorsing and supporting and platforming her certainly do. And there are studies to support that Black people are disproportionately more conservative in areas like sex, gender, and religion. And also this concept of conservatives using women, particularly white women, to push anti-civil rights, anti-feminist ideas are not new. They've been happening forever, and even more significantly after the advancements attained by the civil rights movement. Of course, having white women like Phyllis Schlafly and Louise Day Hicks being flagrantly racist and opposing feminist ideas like the Equal Rights Amendment in order to protect the family was welcomed in the 60s and the 70s. But by the 2010s, white women being anti-feminist or anti-Black might just get you lambasted online as a Karen or a pick-me. I also don't want to undervalue the fact that there is historical and contemporary benefit to using someone like Candace Owens, a Black woman, to parrot anti-feminist and anti-Black ideals, because it's like, oh, well, look, even Black women feel this way as well. It adds a level of legitimacy to their arguments as non-racist and non-threatening, because here's this woman, this Black woman, echoing these sentiments as well. And the paradox of Candace Owens is that she's seated where the benefits of feminist progression and activism intersect with anti-feminist responses and pushback. You own your own company while being a working mom. You were a DEI hire at Turning Point before you got fired for allegedly espousing anti-Semitic ideas. Allegedly. Like, girl, director of urban engagement, Black job, mama, please. It's a Black job. And the only reason why you were able to become a DEI hire at your Black job is because of feminist advancements, activism, and sacrifice. And yet, you support ideas and legislation that are anti-DEI. You unequivocally and vocally, very vocally might I add, supported the fascist manifesto of Project 2025.
Project 2025 sounds pretty good to me. So if I run for president, I want you guys to know in the future, and they step to me and they say, do you Project 2025? I'm gonna look them straight in the face and I'm gonna say, yes. All of it.
It's just ironic because you need feminism to spew your anti-feminist ideals. Like, Project 2025 has clearly laid out its plans to bring America, at the very least, back to a pre-civil rights era society. It's important for me to know that I don't say that strictly rhetorically or proverbially or in any other way, but literally. But of course you don't mind. Candace Owens is a white supremacist wet dream. A provocative statement? Perhaps. But also, perhaps not. Maybe you just don't know the history. Project 2025 didn't fall out of a coconut tree. It's been 50 years in the making. Let's do a little revisionist history, shall we? What do all three of these photos have in common? The Heritage Foundation. That is the conservative organization responsible for Project 2025. They were founded in 1973 by a Paul, Edwin, and Joseph Coors. They don't all share the same last name. I just didn't feel like saying them all. But Coors is where we really need to focus our eye, because he seeded their largest donation and their earliest donation of $250,000. Yes, I am talking about the Coors Beer Company. What you should know, if you like Coors beer, I'm not a beer person, but if you do, you should know that he was a notorious and avid racist, misogynist, and homophobe. He was anti-civil rights and hated what the civil rights movement did to America. Actually, this donation was an expression of his deep-rooted desire to make America great again, to bring America back to a pre-civil rights era. So his investment in the Heritage Foundation was essentially investing in a conservative propaganda machine that would reinstate a worldview and a social climate that benefited white wealthy folks, men in particular. Now understand, while the civil rights movement was a huge legal and discursive success, right? Like, we got so much: the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Rights Act, the desegregation of schools, Loving Virginia. Like, I mean, so much good stuff. It also changed the narrative and the culture. Yes, people were still racist, but the cultural climate was to equate civil rights with morality, right? It was a moral argument. Do you consider yourself to be a moral and just person? Okay, then you believe in civil rights. Oh, the white bigots weren't having that. This is in large part deeply responsible for much of the culture wars we're having. They've been happening for quite some time. The fact that there was a civil rights movement was a part of the culture war. The Civil War was a form of culture war forever. But you get what I'm saying. The Heritage Foundation gave rise to so many conservative think tanks like the American Enterprise Institute, the Hoover Institution, and the Cato Institute, with the express goal of influencing public policy. Of course, all of this is happening as there is a concerted effort to mobilize the conservative Christian right. A lot of white Democrats were fleeing to the South and were over what the what the left had done with the Democrats. They said, girl, y'all did too much. Y'all gave them too much rights. We need to move or we need to go. And so the right was able to galvanize them using, Jesus Christ Superstar. They framed feminism as anti-family, abortion and queer folks as anti-God, and civil rights for Black and brown people as just a bunch of affirmative action hires and welfare recipients taking up all your social services and taking up all your jobs and money. Sound familiar? In fact, we don't get Reagan and Reaganomics without these conservative think tanks and lobbyists painting minorities as antagonists and Democrats as elitists who didn't care about the needs of the white working class Christian family. Which is rich, because for decades, for years, right, Republicans were getting all their donations and were deeply interested in getting their money and being supported by elite millionaires. But as they wanted to reframe the narrative, they were like, oh, it's those rich liberal Democrats that are taking all your money. They're the ones who gave Black people affirmative action. They're the ones who think that queer people deserve rights. And there was this running idea that queer people who couldn't procreate were going to come and snatch up your babies. An idea propagated by this white woman with brown hair who's escaping me right now, but she deeply propagated this idea that like queer people are a big threat to the American family. I just find it interesting how the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Like we still have billionaires infiltrating elections and infiltrating narratives about what Democrats are doing and how they are the anti-populist party, but it's like, mama, it's you! The callers come from inside the house. Anyway, what you should be sure of is that white men were the military leaders of this culture war. But make no mistake, white women were the foot soldiers. Did you know that the Equal Rights Amendment never passed? I'm going to be honest, perhaps vulnerable, and say that I didn't know that. It never met the 38 state ratification requirement that it needed to meet by 1982. I believe that was the year. It's now been ratified by 38 states as of 2020, but that took a little minute. And that's due to, in large part, Phyllis Schlafly's grassroots organization, which is really expensive for a stay-at-home wife, stay-at-home mom, but not when your donors got the coins. Joseph Corse, the same man who donated a significant amount in the Heritage Foundation.
The women's liberationists running down motherhood and saying that it's a menial, degrading career and that the home is a prison from which women should be liberated and brought out into this wonderful workforce. Now, the home is the most fulfilling place for most women. And let's not run it down. And I also want to guarantee to the woman who wants to make marriage and motherhood her full-time career, her legal right to do that. Because one of the first things that the Equal Rights Amendment would do is to invalidate the state laws that make it the obligation of the husband to support his wife.
We don't get the death of the Equal Rights Amendment without the Heritage Foundation. We don't get Reaganomics, this idea that money trickles down from these billionaires up to us down to us brokies, without the Heritage Foundation. They wrote the Mandate for Leadership, a policy book that Reagan followed for, his term. I think at least his first term. And we damn sure don't get a Candace Owens endorsed Project 2025 without the Heritage Foundation. Make no mistake and don't hear what I didn't say here. Men, white men in particular, and the Heritage Foundation in this context are the real enemies here. They're the biggest villains in today's story, in today's video essay. The video purview just happened to be the Miseducation of Feminism, so don't get lost in the sauce of what's all happening. Mama, I'll be honest with you, I'm tired. I've been talking for so long. I think this might be my longest video ever. I had a lot to say about Kamala, and her ideas about working within the system that she finally realized after 60 years was broken, and that kind of contradictory model. But I've already done a 40-minute video on Kamala and her approaches to various different things in the political sphere that y'all didn't live for, that y'all didn't love on. So I'm going to link that in the description box and y'all will get my ideas on that. I want to prioritize a conversation that I had with FD Signifier and Conscious Lee on men and males' roles in feminism. So let's get into that. you're using a lot of feminist language to have this gendered conversation, right? And then you're talking about the lack of role models that young boys and and even males, adult males, have in terms of trying to identify not only what a real man is or what a real man does, but also just how to be a good human in a male body, right? And how to navigate the systems that impede your success, that create these kind of mental health, these poor mental health conditions, right? That a lot that we're talking about in the context of this conversation, experienced by males and boys. And then you also always talk about it from an intersectional framework, which is why, and this is not intended to be a gotcha moment. So you can tell me like how comfortable you feel about this, but it was why, like when you said something once before, and I have the video, so we'll play it for you, that alluded to why you don't call yourself a feminist. And then I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. Actually, I'm just gonna play the video.
It's the old 2000K. Oh, you went way back. No, go ahead.
No. I wouldn't do that. This is a recent video.
Okay. I don't really refer to myself as a feminist, despite what my content tends to project to the world. And this is not because I have an aversion to feminist theory. I'm a person whose core readings in grad school all hinge around feminist gender studies. But it's because of that reading that I recognize that feminists and feminism are loaded terms for a man to describe himself as. And while I think men that call themselves feminists are probably mostly okay, men who promote themselves and monetize themselves as feminists are very much a mixed bag. And if I have to be honest, probably should not be trusted.
But for me, what was a little like, this is a disheartening is I see too often the only male voices who are saying I'm because your work is feminist. It is at its very core, the ideological framework through which we're having this conversation and through which you disseminate much of your work is intersectional feminism. You understanding that you being Black and a male, and then your wife being a woman, and people who are queer and trans, all of those things interact with one another to create specific experiences that we have to have nuanced and complex conversations about. That's like what your work is. It is definitionally intersectional feminism. And the reason why I said it's a little disheartening is so often the people who take up space in this discourse are women or queer folks like myself, and we're not using the term, saying loudly, I am a feminist, as a masculine man like yourself, gives other folks permission, men specifically, hetero, mask-presenting men, permission to say, no, like I too am a feminist. And this is why. This is how I know that me saying I'm a feminist includes me in conversations around masculinity and stuff.
So what you just said is very true, right? Me calling myself a feminist as a traditionally masculine male, married to a Black woman, 2 little boys. I have all the things that the manosphere type cats say they want. They don't want that shit, but they say they want those things, right? That is the ideal. So calling myself a feminist would be a very powerful like statement in that regard. The flip side to me, and from my standpoint, is the framework and the concept of feminism is so ripe for distortion and extortion and grifting that I almost fear the ripple effect for other men, for other Black men. I've seen the Aziz Ansari's. I don't want to brand and market myself around the label, because the consequence of that is, one, giving power to the co-option of feminism, which has also happened. A lot of people co-opted feminism. Katy Perry and them just went to space. Look at that. Girl. Look at feminism.
Girl! Not girl you, but girl them. Don't get me started on that bullshit.
Right. And also, I think the real core of your disappointment, which I have to just sit in, is I know if I call myself a feminist, certain niggas will not listen. They will not show up. They will not click. They will not pay attention. And I've been feeding niggas intersectional theory for 5 years to 1 million subscribers without saying, just feeding them the meat of it. You know what I mean? I've been giving them hot dogs without telling them how it's made, is my whole point. And there is a failure of courage and maybe conviction on my part in that. Professor Odie called me out on that once. I cannot argue against why that's legit and why that's a legit criticism. And I have no response to it other than I think the thing I'm doing is better in the long run.
I see the value in what you're doing. I also still, hold the same criticism.
Shortcomings. You see that it's a half measure on some ends, and that I'm leaving... Because
this is what I want to say, sorry. Because there is so much power in you saying it. And that would be the consequence, right? That people may not, you lose a lot of people who listen to you, right? And that matters when you have a family to feed, right? I don't think that's not important. That's not also important. But I think that, like being a covert feminist and feeding people the ideology without naming it doesn't do much to address the people who are still going to bastardize your talking points under a label that is harmful. Right. So you may be very vehemently anti-manosphere, but people will use your talking points because you haven't said explicitly, this is the theory from which I am pulling this, right? I am an intersectional feminist. People will take your talking points and, you know, like I said, bastardize them and make it seem like, oh, well, this aligns perfectly with the men's rights movement. You identify as a feminist?
I identify more as a womanist, but I know that a lot of people come from all over the spectrum. So I would just say I'm for women's progression, no matter how you want to couch it.
Use whatever term makes the most sense for you, as long as the ideological framework is sound, and it is, to bring more men in, because I think if more men invite other men, there will be no need to create a men's rights movement that is separate from an intersectional feminist movement that's meant to include everyone. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. The only prerequisite I would add is that the Willie Lynch letter and the idea that black masculinity is always being attacked by white supremacy through the tool of femininity, because there's so many black men that believe in that. That is, I think, the prerequisite of the deprogramming or the unlearning that has to happen for a motherfucker to be able to fully embrace feminism. Because right now they all automatically view black men, feminism, white supremacy. Black men being anything but masculine manifestation of Willie Lynch letter. The Willie Lynch letter, and it's gonna be like, hey, you're giving this fictional historical hope to being all this credit for saying that, you know, same gender loving homosexuality in our community came from this, and it's like, man, you're giving white folks too much power. But because this is a very popular phenomenon in our community, the gay agenda, they want to demasculate us, they feminize us. You know what I'm saying? To me, like when I'm talking to people about feminism, womanism, whatever, that is what they latch on to, is that this is a programming that is trying to demasculinize black men. This is a ideology that is trying to feminize black men. This is an ideology that's trying to make it where our women don't want to be with the man and they want to be the man. And it's like, this is what I mean when the first response I said is like, hey, we invest in the shit that literally defining opposition to us, that does us no service. There are too many black men that buy into the rigid nuclear family gender roles, and they believe that if a woman not bound down and confirming to the way they understand this shit, that they are being anti-black. Anti-black in a way, you not playing up my masculinity and manhood, and woman, you ain't no real woman if you can't make me feel like a man. Therefore, feminism is bad.
Damn, that's a bar. Woo! Girl, I'm tired. In conclusion, you made it to the end of this thing. I live for you. Okay, so this video has primarily focused on the miseducation of feminism within feminist movements or around or germane to feminist ideas. And I will say this as many times until my face turns green. It is not an attempt to erase the disproportionate and unequal danger and deleterious impacts that men, the manosphere, and white billionaire oligarchs have had on the culture, on policy, on women, men, non-binary, queer folks, everybody. But there have been a lot of videos, so many videos on the manosphere, that I just felt like I wanted to talk about some of the confusions we have within the feminist movement, because I just don't see enough videos on that. So that's why I chose to make that the purview of today's discussion. I hope you can understand it, and I hope you enjoyed and you learned something and all that other good stuff. Like I said, this is a two-parter. Part 2 will feature more of Laverne Cox, because she had a lot to say about gender and fascism and trans folks and her own experience. So she'll be in part 2. If you're on the Patreon, I will be uploading all of those interviews to the Patreon. I think most of them are already uploaded, but anything that's not uploaded, I'll be uploading it by the end of this week. You can support this channel and all of the work that goes into creating videos like these on this channel and on my podcast channel, Homegirl Hangout with Herbie, by joining the Patreon. It is so helpful, you don't even understand, to keeping me afloat, right? But if you can't do that, if you don't got the money, then what you can do is you can download Straight Arrow News. That helps me because they deeply support this channel. They've been our first and I think longest running sponsor. Now I want to end with some feminist thinkers that I want to shout out here. Anybody who you guys know, write in the comment section, and I will like those comments in the description so that they can be highlighted for people who come and watch, and I'll add more in the description box. But these are feminist thinkers that I love and adore. Noir, shout out to her. She's primarily moved over on Patreon, a queer feminist thinker. Kimberle Foster is the reason why I even got into feminist thought. She introduced me to bell hooks and so many other people via For Harriet, Live For Her. Khadijah and Bo, a non-binary forward thinker who's still on Patreon, support them. Julesy, Olayemi Olorin via Olorinati. My friend Marquise Devon, who does a lot of interesting work on educating young men how to be what I would call feminist, or like male feminists, or engage with feminist masculinity. And then we have like Bell Hooks, Toni Morrison. Do your reading. Do the work. Mama, I have no words. I am tired, girl. Click the link in the description box down below or in the pinned comment to download SAN. It is free to do so. It just really helps me out a lot. I love you too bad. But before I let you go, you know I will never leave you without saying this. I am in a constant state of practice. And so are you. You can never fail when you're in a constant state of practice. I love you. Bye, world.